Millionaire mom catches housekeeper teaching 9 languages to her autistic son, and everything changes. What if the person you least expect holds the key to your child's miracle? When millionaire Jessica caught her housekeeper secretly teaching her autistic son 9 languages, everything she thought she knew about help and hope was turned upside down. This is a story about love, trust, and finding a voice where none seem possible. Please support us by subscribing to our channel and tell us where you are watching from. In the picturesque hills outside Burlington, Vermont, nestled behind a wrought iron gate and a long private driveway, stood the Grand Whitmore estate. It was the kind of house that belonged in a glossy magazine. Gleaming marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a heated pool, and staff in crisp uniforms. But for all its opulence, the mansion felt empty, quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful, but sad. Jessica Whitmore, the powerful CEO of Whitmore Properties, lived here with her 10-year-old son, Eli. Jessica was known across the East Coast as a driven real estate mogul, sharp in business and always impeccably dressed. But at home, she was more of a ghost. Since her husband's passing 5 years ago, she'd poured everything into building her empire. In her mind, that was how she could provide the best for Eli. Eli was different. At 3, he was diagnosed with nonverbal autism. While he was intelligent in ways that baffled even professionals, assembling puzzles in minutes and memorizing traffic patterns, he had never spoken a word. Therapists, speech pathologists, and behavior specialists came and went. Jessica tried everything, from state-of-the-art therapy programs to experimental treatments. But nothing seemed to unlock her son. He spent most of his time in his sunlit playroom, surrounded by books and sensory toys. His eyes rarely met anyone else's. He didn't cry or tantrum. He was just quiet. His silence spoke volumes, and Jessica often didn't know what to do with it. Loving him wasn't the problem. She loved him with every fiber of her being, but she didn't know how to connect with him. So she did what she knew. She built schedules, hired experts, and paid top dollar. She assumed the solution would come from someone with a PhD, not from herself. Enter Lucia Morales, a 52-year-old housekeeper, originally from New Mexico. She had recently moved to Vermont to live closer to her eldest daughter and took the housekeeping job through an agency. Jessica barely interviewed her. She just needed someone who could cook, clean, and stay out of the way. Lucia accepted without fuss. She was quiet and observant, the kind of woman who always seemed to be in the right place without being noticed. She had kind, weathered hands and eyes that had seen a lot, but still held warmth. Lucia noticed what others didn't, how Eli's fingers tapped a rhythm on the table when she played mariachi music while cleaning, how his gaze lingered on her lips when she spoke Spanish to herself while scrubbing the kitchen sink, how he moved his fingers in sync with the syllables of her songs. Eli didn't ignore her. He watched her, closely. Lucia felt something stir in her. She had raised 5 children and helped care for 7 grandkids. She knew what it looked like when a child was listening, even if no one else thought they were. No one had told her to speak to Eli, but she began to anyway. And Eli slowly began to listen. Every afternoon after tidying up the kitchen and folding laundry, Lucia would sit quietly at the edge of the playroom where Eli spent most of his time. She never interrupted his routines. She just began talking aloud in soft melodic tones, almost like narrating her day. At first it was in Spanish, simple things. "¿Dónde está el libro, Eli?" she'd ask as she picked up a book from the floor. Then in French, "Le soleil est jaune." The sun is yellow. Eli wouldn't respond in the way others expected. No words, no nods. But Lucia saw the changes. His eyes flicked toward her, his head tilted slightly. His fingers paused mid-stim to listen. By the end of the week, he was mimicking the rhythm of her speech with his hands. She began to introduce more languages, not like a formal lesson, but like sharing parts of herself. Her late husband had been a translator, and they had traveled the world together. She'd picked up pieces of German, Italian, Mandarin, and even a bit of Russian. Not fluently, but enough to count numbers, say colors, and sing nursery rhymes. Eli lit up at the variety. When Lucia counted in German, he tapped along. When she sang an Italian lullaby, he smiled. A small, barely there smile, but enough to bring tears to her eyes. Jessica, however, remained unaware. She was busy overseeing a new property launch and barely glanced at the daily updates from her staff. As long as Eli was safe and supervised, she didn't ask questions, but others noticed. The private tutor, Mr. Danielson, grew frustrated. "He's zoning out during lessons," he complained one morning in the staff meeting. "He doesn't respond to prompts anymore. He just stares at the door, waiting for the cleaning lady." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Lucia? The housekeeper?" "Yes, I've seen it myself. As soon as she enters the room, he changes. He watches her, listens to her nonsense talk, and ignores everything else." Jessica sighed. "She's not a therapist. She's here to clean. If she's interfering, we'll talk to her." But deep down, the comment stuck with her. The next morning, Lucia found Eli waiting at the kitchen table. He had brought a spoon and a napkin and placed them perfectly beside her usual coffee mug. When she greeted him with a soft, "Buenos dias," he tapped the edge of the mug 3 times. She took it as a yes. They began a new rhythm. Folding napkins? They did it in Italian. Counting blueberries for breakfast? French? Picking up crayons? Mandarin? Lucia didn't push him. She danced with his attention span, letting his curiosity lead. If he wandered off, she let him. If he came back, she welcomed him with a song. It wasn't structured, it wasn't even planned. But it worked. Every day, a little more light came back into Eli's eyes, and no one, least of all Jessica, had any idea what was really happening in the heart of that cold mansion. It was a quiet Saturday morning when Jessica decided to come home early from a conference in Boston. The board meeting had been canceled, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't have back-to-back calls. The mansion was unusually still when she walked in. No clanking pans, no vacuum humming, just the soft murmur of voices coming from the kitchen. Curious, she followed the sound. When Jessica turned the corner, she froze. There, seated at the kitchen table, was her son Eli. His eyes were bright, his posture upright, and across from him sat Lucia, holding colorful flashcards. Lucia flipped one card. "Bonjour," she said gently. Eli paused, looked at her, and "Bonjour," he repeated. The word was soft, a little shaky, but it was real. A sound, a greeting. Jessica dropped her purse with a thud. Lucia turned quickly, startled. Eli blinked, then reached for the next card without even acknowledging his mother. Did he just talk?" Jessica asked, stepping forward, stunned. Lucia nodded slowly. "Yes, that was French. He's been repeating greetings and numbers in different languages. He knows a few in Spanish, too." Jessica's heart raced. "But Eli's never spoken before. How is this possible?" Lucia folded her hands calmly. "I noticed early on that he responded to sound patterns, especially when I spoke in different languages. So I started using simple greetings during chores. At first, he only mimicked the rhythms, but then the words came." Jessica sat down hard on a stool. No one ever told me he had this capacity." Lucia offered a small smile. "They weren't looking for it. They were trying to teach him in a way that worked for most children. But Eli, he listens differently, learns differently. I just tried speaking to him like he could understand. And he did." Jessica stared at her son, who now held a flashcard with a picture of an apple. Lucia said manzana, and Eli repeated, manzana. Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. She thought of all the years she'd felt helpless, signing checks for therapy centers, sitting in cold meetings where specialists used words like limited communication, and quietly mourning the milestones she feared Eli would never reach. Now here he was, calmly learning 9 different languages with the housekeeper. Lucia reached for another card. "Hello," she said in German. "Hello," Eli replied. Jessica exhaled sharply. She had no words, only gratitude and shame. She had spent so much time looking for answers in institutions, in charts and expert opinions, that she had missed what was happening right under her roof. A woman with no formal degree had found a way into her son's world, and everything was about to change. Jessica barely slept that night. She lay in bed replaying the scene in the kitchen over and over. Eli's soft voice, his steady gaze, the way he interacted with Lucia like she was a trusted guide. It shook something loose in her. Guilt, wonder, maybe even a little regret. For years, she'd told herself that her way, working harder, earning more, hiring experts, was the best way to help her son. But seeing Eli thrive under Lucia's quiet influence made her question everything. The next morning, Jessica did something she rarely did. She canceled her meetings. She made herself a cup of coffee, and she sat down at the kitchen island, waiting to observe. Lucia arrived at her usual time, her hair tied neatly in a bun, wearing her standard light blue uniform. She looked surprised to see Jessica still home. "I thought you had your real estate conference today," Lucia said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I rescheduled. I wanted to be here." Jessica paused. "To learn from you." Lucia blinked, clearly not expecting that. Jessica smiled slightly. "Eli's never spoken to anyone like that. Not me, not his tutors. I watched you connect with him. I want to understand how you did it." Lucia set the towel aside and gestured toward Eli, who was sitting on the floor flipping through a book. "You see the way he moves when he hears different rhythms? Languages are music to him, not instructions, not commands. Music. I just sang to him using words, slowly, gently, until he sang back." Jessica was quiet for a moment, watching her son. "I always thought he was locked in his own world." Lucia shook her head. "He's in our world. We just didn't learn his language." Jessica swallowed hard. "Would you be willing to teach me how you've been working with him?" Lucia looked at her long and slow, then nodded. "Of course. But you have to be patient. This isn't about results. It's about trust. He opens up to people who don't try to fix him, but who sit beside him." That afternoon, Lucia led a simple session in the sunroom. She sang a nursery rhyme in French. Jessica sat beside Eli, nervous at first, but followed along. Un, deux, trois. Eli's fingers tapped to the beat. He turned and looked at his mother. Jessica smiled and continued. Quatre, cinq, six. To her amazement, Eli reached out and touched her hand. Just for a second, but enough. Tears filled her eyes. It wasn't about teaching him to be normal. It was about meeting him where he already was. That night, Jessica tucked Eli into bed for the first time in months, and for the first time ever, he whispered something as she kissed his forehead. Buenas noches. Jessica stepped out of the room and wept. Her son had found his voice, and she was finally learning how to listen. Word travels fast in wealthy circles, especially in places like Willow Creek, where mothers traded private tutors like stocks and bragged about the latest therapeutic breakthroughs over Pilates and brunch. So when Jessica Cartwright suddenly canceled her contract with a $300 an hour speech pathologist, people noticed. And when she started sharing stories about Eli speaking French, Spanish, and even Mandarin, well, the whispers began. At first, it was disbelief. Are you sure it's not echolalia? One mom asked snidely. Jessica's just grasping at straws, another chimed in. That child's barely said mama in years. But Jessica didn't care. Every day she sat with Lucia and Eli. She hummed, she sang, she tried words in new languages with careful precision. She watched as her son grew bolder, not just repeating sounds but making eye contact, initiating touch, even requesting colors or toys in different tongues. His world was opening, and so was hers. But not everyone was thrilled. Mr. Danielson, the tutor, returned to the mansion one morning to retrieve his books and drop off final reports. He was met by Lucia at the door. I need to speak with Ms. Cartwright, he said, his tone curt. I don't think she realizes the risk she's taking. Lucia led him to the library where Jessica was reviewing Eli's new progress journal. Jessica, he began, not bothering with a greeting, I hope you'll reconsider. This woman has no training, no credentials. You're jeopardizing your son's development by letting her play therapist? Jessica didn't flinch. I appreciate your concern, but I'm following what works for my son, not what works on paper. She's a housekeeper, he scoffed. She speaks in rhymes and foreign phrases. That's not education. It's entertainment. Lucia remained silent. Jessica stood slowly. You're right. Lucia is our housekeeper. She's also the only person who's managed to connect with Eli in a meaningful, consistent way. And until you do the same, you don't get to discredit her methods. Mr. Danielson clenched his jaw but said nothing. After he left, Jessica turned to Lucia. You've changed our lives. I won't let anyone shame you for that. Lucia looked down, tears shimmering in her eyes. I never expected any of this, ma'am. I only wanted to give him a little peace. Jessica smiled. You gave him much more than that. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls in golden light, Eli ran into the living room holding a drawing. On the page were stick figures, 3 of them, one small boy, one woman with a ponytail, and another with long hair and a heart on her shirt. Underneath, scribbled in crayon, was a single word: family. Lucia covered her mouth with her hand. Jessica knelt beside her son and whispered, Is that us? Eli nodded. The house had never felt more full of life. It had been nearly 2 months since Jessica discovered Lucia's secret sessions with Eli, and in that time, everything had changed. The boy who once sat in silence now spoke in colorful bursts, sometimes Spanish, sometimes Mandarin, sometimes both in the same sentence. He still didn't like eye contact much, and he still flapped his hands when overstimulated, but he smiled more. He laughed, and Jessica had fallen into a new rhythm herself, one that didn't revolve around conference calls and business deals, but around story time, flashcards, and song games with her son. One evening, after Eli had gone to sleep, Jessica asked Lucia to sit with her on the patio. They sipped tea in the warm dusk, the crickets chirping softly in the distance. I've been thinking, Jessica began, and I want to offer you something. Lucia blinked, wary. Ma'am? Jessica leaned forward. I want to send you to school, fully paid. You have a gift, Lucia, a rare one. You connect with children in a way I've never seen. I think you could be one of the best language and communication therapists in the country, if you wanted to. Lucia sat back, stunned. Me? School? She laughed nervously. I never even finished college in El Salvador. I came here to clean houses and send money home. That's what I do. That's what you did, Jessica said gently. But what you do now, it's magic. I've seen it with my own eyes. Lucia was quiet, her fingers twisted around the handle of her mug. It's not magic. It's just love and listening. Jessica smiled. Exactly. And people need to learn that from you. Lucia's eyes brimmed with tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. I've already looked into programs at community colleges nearby. You could keep working with Eli part-time while you study. I'll support you every step of the way. Lucia nodded slowly. I'll think about it, I promise. Just then, the sliding door creaked open, and a sleepy Eli appeared in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Jessica stood. Hey, buddy, couldn't sleep? He shook his head. Then, without prompting, he looked at Lucia and whispered, Can you sing the moon song? Lucia knelt and wrapped her arms around him. Of course. She began humming a gentle lullaby in Portuguese, and Eli melted into her shoulder, his body relaxing completely. Jessica watched them, overwhelmed. This wasn't just about therapy anymore. It was about family, trust, growth, and the idea that sometimes the person society overlooks, the one scrubbing floors in silence, holds the key to unlocking a child's world. As Lucia carried Eli back to bed, Jessica looked up at the stars. She knew deep down that this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. 6 months later, the Cartwright home felt like a completely different place. Gone were the sterile routines and cold professionalism. In their place were posters with foreign alphabets on the walls, flashcards scattered across the dining table, and laughter echoing through the hallways. The air smelled of cinnamon and warm tea, and Eli's giggles could be heard daily, especially when Lucia taught him tongue twisters in Italian or rhymes in Japanese. Lucia had taken Jessica's offer seriously. She was now enrolled in a local community college's language and child development program, attending classes in the evenings and tutoring Eli in the afternoons. Every week, she learned new strategies and techniques, blending them with her intuitive approach. Her professors were astonished at her natural talent, and Jessica, She had stepped away from two of her biggest real estate development projects and turned her focus to something entirely new: advocacy for multilingual education and inclusion for neurodiverse children. She began sharing Eli's story, carefully and respectfully, at conferences and local parent meetings, encouraging others to think outside the box when it came to raising and teaching autistic children. One bright Saturday morning, the Cartwrights hosted a backyard celebration. Neighbors, teachers, and even a few of Lucia's classmates gathered under string lights and colorful banners. A small sign at the entrance read, "Language is the bridge. Every child deserves to cross." Jessica stood before the group with a microphone, her heart pounding. Eli stood beside her, holding Lucia's hand. "6 months ago, I was a mother desperate for answers," Jessica began. "I was throwing money at specialists, searching for a fix. What I didn't realize is that my son never needed to be fixed. He just needed to be heard. And it was Lucia, our housekeeper, who taught me that." The crowd clapped warmly. She didn't come with a degree or a fancy title. She came with compassion. She listened when no one else did. And she unlocked a world in my son I never thought I'd see. Jessica turned to Lucia, who looked down shyly. "I want the world to know her name, not because she's our housekeeper, but because she's an educator, a healer, a gift to this family." Lucia wiped her eyes, overwhelmed. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the backyard had quieted, Eli sat on the porch steps with a picture book in his lap. He turned to Lucia and said softly, "You're my best friend?" Lucia knelt beside him. "And you are mine, Eli." Jessica watched them from the doorway, her heart full. Not long ago, she feared she'd never truly connect with her son. But now every day was a new chapter, written in love, patience, and many beautiful languages. As the stars blinked above, Jessica whispered to herself, "We found our miracle." And it didn't come from a doctor's office. It came from a mop, a melody, and the heart of a woman who saw what no one else did. And with that, their journey continued. One word, one step, one song at a time. Jessica never imagined that the woman who mopped her floors would become the person who transformed her son's life. But love, patience, and a gift for language made all the difference. Today, Eli thrives, not just in words, but in joy. And Lucia, she's no longer just the housekeeper. She's family, and an inspiration to many. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Every share helps us reach more hearts. Thanks for watching.